Thanks so much, Emily, and thank you everybody for joining today. So I think this is a very good topic for today as it's Safer Internet Day, which I just became recently aware of celebrating around the world where we can all unite for a better internet. And encryption is a great way and a great topic for us to introduce some of the context of how Virtru can help you protect your business privacy. So in celebration of Safer Internet today, we really wanted to give a great giveaway. As part of this, unfortunately, our marketing budget did not suffice, but we really wanted to give away this brand new Porsche. But really, since we aren't able to do that, we do want to use this at least as an analogy for your data. So as many little boys, including myself, will dream, this is a dream car for us. And if you think about this in context of your data, if you were to give this car to your local hotel or restaurant valet, you would be handing over the keys to this very valuable possession. And when you think about that, the first question I always have is, how do I trust the valet with these keys? How do I know that this will not be Ferris Bueller's Day Off and this car is going to go off into the sunset within that? So the analogy we're using here is think of your data as one of your most valuable possessions, because it indeed is, as an organization, that you need to protect as you would of any of your most valuable possessions. And on top of that, giving access to those keys becomes a really important topic, and that's what today's webinar is about. So this becomes a challenge in today's modern cloud environments. So as we are moving our information to cloud systems, whether they be our collaboration systems like email, whether they be file storage around that, we now have to start thinking about how our data is being presented to not only the systems that we're storing that data in, but in addition, who we're sharing that data with. So historically, we're dealing with firewalled systems that are protecting the perimeter. As we migrate to cloud systems, how do we enforce business privacy within that? And so now we're going to really focus on some ways that companies choose to do that. And really what it comes down to is we really like this Gartner quote because, as Steve Riley is saying, not only is encryption important, but it is also around your key management, including control of those keys. So today's topics are really about how you as an organization can not only encrypt your data, but also have full control and access to those keys around that. So the reason that this is such a big topic today is, simply put, giving access or unfettered access to our business data does not meet our business privacy needs, and it really comes down to three main points around that. So the first is typically trust. So how do we know that we can trust organizations with our data? Obviously, as we're talking about email, for instance, we're dealing with reputable cloud providers, Microsoft with their O365 platform, Google with their G Suite platform. They have compliance mechanisms and activities that go around and ensuring that you can trust them as organizations, but in many cases, you're a company doing business outside of the U.S. Can I trust a U.S. company with my most sensitive data? It's a broad question that we need to answer when we're talking about encryption. There are certain compliance activities that us as organizations must go through. Data residency is one of those when we're dealing with criminal justice information, when we're dealing with, in the U.S., ITAR or exportable information from an EAR standpoint. There are specific regulations that us as organizations need to go through to ensure that that data is only accessible to authorized parties. And finally, the third area is around control. So as we are all familiar with, if you're in a regulated industry that may have subpoena across your data, we want to ensure that only authorized parties can subpoena access to your data and control. And this all comes down to how, number one, I'm storing that data in these cloud providers, but also how I'm actually protecting the encryption keys themselves from the environment. So let's step back and talk about encryption and how this can help us protect your business privacy. So I'm gonna take this from a very high level rather than getting into all of the full details around different encryption and the key length and all of that. I'm gonna break it down to two very simple concepts. So primarily what encryption technology does is it allows you to perform mathematical operations on your data so that people that only have access to the certain keys can unlock that data. So pretty simple in concept. There's a lot of really complicated math and algorithms go behind the scenes, but two of the most common mechanisms that we have are symmetric and asymmetric encryption. So covering symmetric encryption first, this is where you have a key that's been generated or stored that you use to encrypt that data, and that exact same key, when made accessible to another party or yourself, is used to decrypt it. So when you're thinking about a key management, a key aspect when you're using a symmetric type encryption is ensuring that only authorized parties have access to that key. So for instance, if I encrypt an email and send it to Emily, I want to make sure that only Emily and I are able to access that encryption key with symmetric encryption. Asymmetric encryption is been around a long time and is most familiar to us from pretty good privacy, PGP type of encryption. S-MIME, invented in the mid-90s to help with that. But more commonly, this is the back-end technology that we use every day when you see the little lock on your web browser screen, or when you see HTTPS, that is using SSL or TLS type of encryption. And so what happens here is rather than having a shared encryption key that's known by both parties, both sides of the conversation, you have a split key where you have a public key and a private key. So public keys are available broadly, can be advertised, but only individuals or organizations or servers that have access to the private key can decrypt the content. So two different approaches there. Both are incredibly secure as long as only authorized parties have access to those private keys or the symmetric keys as we have it. So let's go through some of those methodologies there. We mentioned a few different types between asymmetric as well as symmetric. So the most common way when we're sharing information, when we're uploading files to the internet, when we're sending emails, is TLS-based encryption. So we see this a lot with Google's ecosystem in G Suite. Google is doing an amazing job of really pushing email vendors to require TLS and accept secure connections for that. So what happens in these connections is this is a way to protect the connections between servers. So if I'm sending an email from a Google G Suite server to an Office 365 server, that will have a encryption mechanism over the actual pipe that indicates that nobody can listen to that connection. But what happens in this case is the actual email itself is going across like a regular email, so a postcard, if you will, but anybody listening to the actual connection would not have access to this. So one of the downsides of this when thinking about this from a purely an email perspective is once you hand off that email to a recipient's email server, there's all sorts of technologies that may also be involved when you're talking about mail routing. So there's no guarantee once that connection's been handed off that there are unsecure connections in there as we go through that. Another way when we're talking about securing files or even securing emails again is a portal type of access. In this case, you will upload your content to a common place, and anybody who's trying to access that information is external to your organization will go log into that portal, provided a user ID and a password typically, but there's other mechanisms as well. And then they'll go reach in and go grab that encrypted content. So again, very secure way to handle this. But the broader question we have typically when we're introducing portals is, does that, who has access to the content? Is that meeting your security and your compliance needs? Do I have to trust specific parties with that information? So the other individual, so those are two examples of typically TLS-based or secure connections and securing servers as well. There's some great client-side technology which will allow you as content creators to encrypt content so that only authorized parties are able to access that, and that's through PGP or S-MIME. Again, a little bit more email focused here, but PGP is commonly used to protect files and going through that as well. In this case, we're only sending secure communication, typically from a server or from a client, to people who will also have that technology installed. So again, if I'm going to send an encrypted email, an attachment to Emily, so I'm going to have access to Emily's public key. She may have sent me a previous email from S-MIME that gives me her certificate, or I might go to a key store to go look at that. But what I'm going to use is Emily's public key, and then send that email off, typically client-side protected, so that none of the parties in between, the email services, any of the connections, that will only be decryptable by any individual that has that private key. So you notice I had a couple things here that you typically do not see when we're talking about both PGP and S-MIME. So typically these are both implemented as client-side solutions. Data is encrypted usually client-side, usually client-side for the private key around that. And the reason I added usually is because Google has recently announced support for S-MIME technologies, but they're taking a slightly different approach to S-MIME, where they're actually hosting the S-MIME certificates through that. So rather than having pure client-side encryption with S-MIME, there are other vendors that happen to be, and Google happens to be one of them, that are also doing hosting. So it usually is client-side encryption, but there may be still access restrictions around that. So at Virtru, what we're recognizing as I talk daily with customers around their need to enforce business privacy is the simple mechanisms today just aren't working. Okay? So when I'm dealing with TLS and portals and all of those pieces, what I'm doing is potentially giving access to parties that should not have access for my needs. And these technologies typically will only work if the recipient party also is using comparable technology. If I can only send an email encrypted to Emily with PGP or S-MIME, if she's also using that and shared that information with me. Okay. And additionally, client-side technologies, when we do use them, are typically hard to use. We have to deal with key management. We have to deal with potentially losing private keys and going through that process. So at Virtru, we're really trying to apply a lot of these security concepts, but make them more adoptable by you as an enterprise without sacrificing your security and ensuring that only authorized parties have access to that. So there's three themes that we really focus our technology on: are easiness, security, and control. And what this really comes down to is, with encryption technology, we want you to be able to ensure your business privacy without introducing additional complications through that. So we do this by building client-side encryption directly within your native email experience that provides a security layer that only authorized parties have access to that. And even when you use our technology, you do not lose control of encryption keys as the sender. So you have the ability to revoke access to that, ensuring only authorized parties having access to that. So what this technology looks like from a software standpoint is we really have our base software as a service offering that we have built, purpose-built, to ensure that Virtru nor any third party ever has access to both encryption keys and content in their service environment. The way we do this is we implement a split knowledge architecture where all of the encryption is happening within a Virtru client that is totally under your business's control, ideally in a native email client. And then we send off that encrypted content via your cloud providers. So if this is a file sitting in your Google Drive system, we'll encrypt it locally on your PC. We will encrypt that, then upload it into Google's ecosystem, your cloud provider here. And then the actual encryption key will be stored within Virtru's ecosystem. Okay? So if I share that Google Drive content with one of my colleagues, or if I share that with Emily outside of my organization, I'm also granting Emily access to the encryption key as well. So Emily can go pull down the Google Drive file, then she will go ask Virtru's system, am I authorized to go access that encryption key? And then pull that down and decrypt that locally from there. So purely client-side decryption as we have. So we call this key server the Virtru ACM, or Access Control Manager, as we go through that environment. But one of the aspects with this software as a service infrastructure, this is what Virtru is built, purpose-built here, is that Virtru, a few employees at Virtru actually can see the actual encryption keys that are stored within the environment. We have a split knowledge architecture that ensures we can't decrypt any content in our environment, but the actual encryption keys are stored in our ecosystem, in our software as a service environment. And this alone is the case where we have introduced a customer key server so that Virtru will never see those environments. In this case, we are not requiring you to trust Virtru with the keys themselves. Any operations are always going to go through your infrastructure. But with implementing this technology, we wanted to make this transparent to the end users, as well as ensure that we're not adding additional steps that we may have with public and private key cryptography. So what this actually looks like then is we have the same exact infrastructure where you are doing client-side encryption from the content creator standpoint and client-side decryption from within the content consumer standpoint. And we'll use those same symmetric encryption keys that are AES 256-bit encryption keys to encrypt the content. But before those keys are ever uploaded into Virtru's ecosystem, we'll actually use a public and a private key pair that you host within a key server that is in your environment. So this environment that we have set up in this key exchange is over a secure connection that only the Virtru ACM as well as the customer CKS will talk to. So every time an encryption key is requested, or the process that goes through that will go through the customer key server environment. And that key exchange is very important because it ensures that Virtru never sees the actual encryption keys. So under a control standpoint, these keys are never out of your control. If there was a subpoena for keys in our environment and against your cloud provider, we have nothing to respond to with that subpoena. All of those need to go directly to you as an organization in the US. So what this operation looks like is all of the encryption still happens on the client. All the decryption happens there in an email. That would be in their native email experience. And every time a key is requested across Virtru's key service layer, it will go down to your customer key server that's hosted in your environment and then pass back down to the consumer. But one of the aspects of this is Virtru, even in transit under this architecture, cannot even see that. And the way we protect that information is the concept of rewrapping those encryption keys. So the key that is most pressing here is this message key on the right. So this is the key that is used both to encrypt the content as well as decrypt the content. But since this is stored encrypted in Virtu's ecosystem, there is a public key that we use of the key server to protect the actual encryption key. But the private key that's associated with the key server is never accessible to Virtru. So we pass down, when we try to request that message key from one of the clients to go decrypt that message, We pass that down to the key server, and that is decrypted in memory of the key server. But we can't transmit that unencrypted message key back to the client because that would potentially mean that Virtru could see that key itself. So we actually rewrap that key with a public key associated with each of the clients that are generated automatically. The great news about this architecture: number one, Virtru never has access to the actual encryption keys. Number two, we're not sacrificing that ease of use. The client, the customer, the person receiving the email is unaware. They didn't have to go through any extra steps in buying certificates or generating private keys and public key pairs. This is all handled automatically under the server, under the services. Okay. So the benefits of this approach. So the real value of this is, number one, you have an easy-to-use, secure platform that provides you full control of those encryption keys, no matter what approach you build from a Virtru or implement from a Virtru standpoint. Okay? When you implement our key service layer, that allows you to meet data residency requirements because those keys are always going through your data centers that are in the areas that you're located. You don't have to worry about if your cloud systems are spread across multiple locations around the world. It also helps you comply with specific regulations. In the US, there are a couple here around handling CJIS information or criminal justice information. EAR data is data that cannot or should not be exported, that requires our secrets associated with those, or other business privacy regulations that are associated with that. And this client-side encryption will hook into your native email experience of Gmail, directly within your Outlook environments, Google Drive there. So what we wanted to do now is take these concepts of symmetric encryption keys, key servers, and everything, and practically show you how it works. And the best way to do that is just to see it in action. I'm going to do a quick demonstration to give you a feel for the user experience, but more importantly, discuss what's actually happening underneath the covers as we go through that demonstration. So as we go through this now, I am going to use this in the context of email. So email, a product that we use every day, to the positive or negative aspects of that. Both of my accounts here are inbox 0, so we're starting fresh. So I'm going to send an email from our blue window, who is Brett at virtruprivacy.com. That's my organization. That's who I'm logged in as. And I'm going to go receive an email as I'm a secure in my email as well. So both of these users have Virtru's direct integration into Gmail experience for G Suite. And what this actually will look like is a browser plugin that will hook into, in our case, our Chrome browser. So for these users, if I would like to send an encrypted communication, it's as easy as turning Virtru encryption on. And I'm going to go send an email to I'm a secure. At this point, you'll notice I can send an email to anybody in my address book. I'm just happening to send it to someone who has Virtru installed. We have the ability to send emails to external parties. Even if they don't have Virtru installed, or without requiring them to install a client, they can go decrypt it directly on their client through a web browser session. But in today's demo, we're going to keep it simple, and we're just going to send to someone who also that has Virtru installed. And as I go through this, I'm going to go send something that we definitely want to do. Definitely want to encrypt, and that's going to be my credit card information. So this case, even though I'm sharing it with you from a demonstration standpoint, this would be something that only the authorized recipients and parties have there. I'm also going to include an attachment, and you'll notice that attachment now has a trusted data format, our open source format that we use to wrap all of your encrypted content. So let's talk about it. What's actually happening underneath the covers here. So when I turn Virtru encryption on, we know that we're protecting the email, but what's actually happening is we're generating AES 256-bit encryption keys right here on this client. Those are only accessible to this client section. This draft is protected with those keys using that symmetric encryption as we have. As I dropped another email on here, as we have that, I'm also protecting the attachment with an additional encryption key. So I'm going to hit send here. And when I'm hitting that encrypting email, it happens very quickly. But what just happened there is that exact diagram that we showed earlier. The encryption key went up to, our keys in this case, went up to the Virtru ecosystem in our software as a service environment. And then the email just was sent off as encrypted ciphertext. So let's go look at that together. So I'm going to go to my sent items. You can see when I go to that sent items, we'll do it again real quick because it happens quickly. It's going to say decrypting. So I'm going to go get that encryption key and decrypt it locally. But remember, let's go look at that original message that's actually stored within these Gmail servers here. So this is the actual message that's stored on the servers. It looks just like gibberish. It's ciphertext. And the only way to decrypt this message is to gain access to the actual encryption key associated with that. Okay. So we encrypted locally on the client, and we encrypted with those keys with our regular software as a service offering. Those keys are being uploaded to Virtru. When we have a customer's key server involved, before it's ever loaded, that will be automatically, I'll have the public key of my key server for my organization, and I'll use that to encrypt the encryption key before it's uploaded so Virtru never sees that. So let's go to the recipient experience now. So the recipient experience, yeah, we just see an email in our inbox. I have the Virtru client installed. Now I go request access to that key. Am I authorized to go do that? That's what Virtru is doing. And if I am authorized, we'll go decrypt directly within that environment. Okay. If I have a key server involved, then I'm going to go request access to that key, and I'm going to send it my client's public key that was generated when I installed Virtru. I'm going to go hand that off to the customer key server, and then it will rewrap that key and still decrypt locally with that symmetric encryption key. So in both of these environments, you as the sender or you as the administrator never lose control of that encryption key. Okay? So let's go look at that sent items again together, and you'll notice a few things have changed if you're paying real close attention. The first is that we can see I actually have a read receipt indicating that my recipient has read this email. If I want to revoke access to this email, whether I sent it to the wrong party, or I sent something I didn't mean to, I can hit the revoke button directly from my inbox that will allow me to revoke access to that. And now if I go look, even if the window's open there, the recipient's access has now been revoked because I, as the sender, have revoked access to that encryption key. Let's go try to go back in there. It's going to go try to request the key. I am no longer authorized to access that. Access has been revoked by the policy there. So no matter what, even without or with the key server, you have full control over access policies to that encryption key. Okay. You also have the ability to enforce other aspects of that. So I can revoke after a period of time by choosing expiration. I can turn on forwarding aspects, or we have a concept of content protection with PDF watermarking. So all of these concepts are available to you as owners of those encryption keys, and you can see the full access rights to those. Another aspect that we're able to surface to you is who else has been granted access to these encryption keys. So for instance, if I wanted to check a message that's been potentially forwarded, if I had not disabled forwarding of that message when I sent it, I have the ability to track a full forwarding chain of other parties that have been granted access to the keys. I can revoke access to the entire email messages, or you noticed I have revoked these individually of who may access those keys. So access and control of the encryption keys, a very important topic that only authorized parties are able to actually control that. There's all sorts of other great features that we'd love to cover in detail around this. But since our time's short today, if you have any other information, we'd be happy to go through a full walkthrough of the Virtru platform, including how we can also introduce data loss prevention for you as administrators, how we can protect email in transit, and what this would look like from that standpoint. But for now, as we continue to talk about encryption keys as we're going through that, I'd love to open it up for questions that have been either submitted or that you're submitting now via the questions window in your GoToWebinar screen. So I'm going to hand it off back to Emily to go through some of those questions that you submitted already or are submitting now, and I'd love to address those right now.
Excellent. Thanks, Brett. We have a few questions coming in. How will this impact blind subpoenas? Would they have to come to the organization for the keys, so at minimum they're now informed?
Absolutely. So blind subpoenas is one of the use cases that this comes to. And let's talk through the concept of a blind subpoena if you're, as an organization, aren't familiar with that. So there is a way based off of security regulations and here in the U.S. for an organization to have a blind subpoena as a cloud provider. We've seen a lot of this, unfortunately, as Edward Snowden released many of information around this, and there's a question of who has access to content and going through that. So if Virtru were given a blind subpoena, which means that the organization that is using our technology has no idea that that subpoena is even coming to us or coming to your cloud provider, what can we give up when you're using when you're using our technology? Can we give those encryption keys up? And the answer is simply no. Us as an organization have no mechanism to get to those private keys that, despite my poor grammar, we do not have the ability to actually get to the private keys that are used to protect that. And it's simply all subpoenas must go through you as the company who not only owns those keys, but are storing those in a protected manner with your customer key server.
Okay, great. How does Virtru handle high availability?
So the customer key server is something that, by its very name, is yours. So the customer key server itself, we haven't actually addressed what this actually is. So this is software. This is a software environment that we deploy using container technology. The container technology allows you to spin one of these key servers up in either your data center or within a cloud provider of your choice. Amazon, Google, all sorts of cloud providers allow you to host these types of containers that are in your control. So high availability is a very important aspect, because if the key server is not available, you're not able to decrypt your messages because they must all go through that. So as part of the installs of these key servers, when I set these up for our customers, when they set them up for themselves, the key aspect is to understanding your deployment architecture around load balancing, and as well as high availability across multiple zones in the US. So depending on the complexity of your organization, that will go through a load balancer of your choice. You can have, just as any data center or web server has load balancers, you'll use that same load balancing technology to load balance your TCP traffic that will go back and forth to the key servers.
Okay, I like this question. What was meant by split knowledge in the SaaS model?
Yeah, so split knowledge, the concept, and would love for you to, for folks to actually go in and dig into this a little bit further by either viewing one of our white papers where we describe this further, or even on our new website that we just launched last week. We really dig into the details of this. But this, in its simplest form, split knowledge means that us as a cloud provider that has encryption keys do not have the ability to decrypt any of your content inside of our system. So we do not, as a company, have the ability to reach into your inbox and pull that encrypted message and then combine that with the encryption key to decrypt that message. It also means that we're not storing unencrypted content of yours, so we only are encrypting and decrypting under machines and clients that are under your control as an organization, never within our cloud systems.
Great. Brett, could you flip to the last slide there as well, just so that while we're going through Q&A, if anybody would like to request a demo for your organization, if you just go to this URL here, which I'll put in the chat box as well, you can set that up while we're kind of going through everything here. So we do have another question. I believe you showed it in the demo, but maybe this is something we can just show quickly again, is how difficult is it for a recipient to open an email? Do they have to log in and enter a password, or is it just a matter of clicking the button to accept?
Yeah, so there's really there's two flows that you need to be interested when you're looking at any encryption technology. The first flow is, how does a recipient that has Virtru software or has comparable technology decrypt that information? But the second question always should be, what if they don't have it? Can they even receive encrypted emails or going through that process? So the two flows that we have specifically there are, when you have actual encrypted emails, you are more than welcome to install and use one of our Virtru clients. So we have native clients into your Gmail experience, as well as we'll have clients into your Outlook. We have mobile clients that will do this natively as well, and it's as simple as accessing and going through that process where you'll decrypt directly inside of the email experience. Okay? So when you don't have a Virtru email client installed, you also have the ability to decrypt that message. If I were to go send this to newtovirtru@gmail.com and go send that exact same email that we have with the PCI data or whatever the case may be, those individuals also have the ability to decrypt that without actually having to go download and install the client itself. So what that experience will look like is they will receive that same encrypted email in their inbox, but since they don't have a Virtru client installed, then they will receive an HTML message that's all customizable by you as the sender or as an organization, with logos and going through this process. They will get this Unlock Me button, and the Unlock Me button, if they've already authenticated themselves, will automatically decrypt the message, still client-side, not in a portal, but only in this browser session locally here. But the key aspect to this is we're not asking those users to create new user IDs. What we're actually doing is we're going to allow them to use their existing identity. So if you're on a cloud provider that has OAuth or SAML or OpenID, we're going to federate that so you can just say, who are you? I'm going to go authenticate, in this case, using Google, because I'm on a Gmail address. So when I'm going to go use that as OAuth authentication, then I go view, am I authorized to go view and access that? That will decrypt locally, directly in this browser session that we have. But you as the sender have those exact same sender controls that allow you to do things like revoking access to that, disable forwarding. All of those are supported even when they're decrypting locally on their browser session. Speaking of browsers, this is not limited to Chrome. This can happen in Firefox. This can happen in Internet Explorer. This can happen in Safari on your iOS device. This can be in Edge. This can be in Opera. All of these things are client-side decryption, even if you haven't installed Virtru plugins that will allow you to go through that process.
Great. Thanks, Brett. Is the CKS included in the business package?
No, you'll notice if you all have looked at our new website, we have 3 specific product offerings or packages that we have. And the CKS is part of our enterprise offering. Typically when customers are implementing the customer key server, that is typically solving specific business needs where the actual protection of the encryption keys is above and beyond just a regular business's need. So that's part of our enterprise offering that we'd be happy to discuss with you further about.
Okay. Let me just see here. What software is needed to host our own key server, and how complicated is it to configure and host?
Yeah, so the key server technology itself, as I mentioned, is a container, and the technology that's required to do that is Docker, Docker. So this is, to some organizations, a bit of a newer technologies that are more familiar with VM images for virtual machines and going through that. Essentially, this technology is similar in approach that allows you as administrators to deploy a self-contained container and go deploy that. So that's the primary technology that is hosting this key server. As mentioned before with high availability, you're also required to use a load balancer in front of this as well. It doesn't have to be a hardware load balancer. It could be as simple as an open source technology like HA proxy, but a load balancer would be required as well. And finally, the only way that we'll communicate with these key servers is over encrypted connections. We talked about TLS connections at the beginning of the webinar. So part of that process is standing up and setting up certificates that you as administrators are probably already used to setting up within that. So the container itself is Docker. Within that, you'll communicate through a load balancer, and we'll communicate over secure connections to make sure that those key interchanges are protected as well.
Great. What happens if our customer key server goes down?
So if your customer key server either goes down or is not available, effectively the same, then your recipients or the people that are trying to access your files that have been encrypted will not be able to decrypt those. And it's very simple because Virtru does not have access to the encryption keys. So we have no way to give them encryption keys without going through your key server. So it is technically impossible for us to decrypt any content without that key server up and running. So the question, again, I think it was a little early in the conversation, but high availability becomes a really important consideration for you as an organization when you're hosting key servers to ensure that all of your recipients are able to decrypt that content locally on their clients.
Great. You've talked about email, but is there a solution that secures documents in cloud storage?
Yeah, so email is pretty much where we have started as a company. No question about that. We are Google's recommended partner for email. We have direct integrations into Outlook and going through those. So the broader question is, what about files? We have files in there. So the answer is yes, we do have the ability to protect files, but we're really focusing as an organization on specific environments first, and then expanding out above and beyond that. So from a file protection standpoint, in the Google ecosystem, we have direct integrations to document management solutions, including AO Docs that sits on top of Google Drive. You'll notice on our website we also have a Drive offering for Google Drive to protect file and contents that are stored in your cloud provider, in this case Google Drive. And then this year we'll be offering later solutions for other cloud providers, and stay tuned for information about persistent file access as well. So that's really a big focus for Virtru throughout the rest of the year is persistent file protection across multiple vendors above and beyond just the Google ecosystem.
Great. Do we set up the private keys ourselves?
Absolutely. You set those keys up yourself. Virtru does not set those up for you. Those are set up and never accessible to Virtru as an organization. You, as a company, will send your public key to us as part of the installation so we can distribute those to each of the clients, but the private keys remain under your control and handling through that. We help you if you do not have keys that you're going to generate through that generation process. We can help you generate those locally. Not a difficult process. It's just simply a script you run on your machine to go generate the keys. But access to those keys is very critical. And as well, backing those up and ensuring only authorized parties within your organization have access to those encryptions.
Great. I've got an email-related question. Can you verify that HIPAA data can be emailed to recipients who do not use Virtru and receive and reply to those emails without losing encryption?
Yes. So that's the short answer. But absolutely, that is really a key business driver for Virtru and how we can help you as organizations protect not only business privacy, but your customers' privacy. And in this case, HIPAA data, there's associated concepts of a business associates agreement, or BAA, that we will absolutely sign as part of that, which ensures that you can use our technology to protect that HIPAA data. And your recipients don't have to install Virtru. They can reply directly within that secure reader environment, as well as include attachments, which is a very common thing when your healthcare provider sends documents or authorization forms that you need to fill out and send back. That's definitely capabilities we provide from a HIPAA compliance standpoint.
Okay. So say a client opened an encrypted email on their desktop, then wanted to access the same email using their iPhone. What issues must the recipient know in order to open the same email on their iPhone?
No issues. So all of those cases are fantastic. So this is a huge advantage, and one of the reasons Virtru encryption is easy. Because we're using symmetric key encryption, which means the same key is used to both encrypt and decrypt the content. And we authorize your access to go receive that key. Very, very different from a public-private key technology where you have to ensure that your private keys are both on your iPhone or your Android device and your email client. So in this case, you can either decrypt your message, so you could either decrypt them directly through your email clients, as we've shown through the Virtru clients, or you can go request access to that key by authenticating yourself through a web browser session. And in this case, it would be a seamless experience because both would be authorizing your email account by authenticating yourself, and then once you have authorized access, there's no issue between those two environments.
Okay. Is Virtru planning to release an add-on for Apple Mac Mail?
No, we are not planning on releasing a direct add-on for Apple Mac Mail. And the reason for that is really there's no consistent programming interfaces for us to hook into the native Apple Mac Mail experience. Apple Mac Mail doesn't provide us an add-on architecture like Outlook does in the Windows environment. Therefore, for us to provide a stable user experience, we are not able to provide that at this time.
Okay. I'm not sure I understand this question, but maybe you might, Brett. How do parties authenticate within Virtru?
Yes, so parties will authenticate with Virtru, potentially and hopefully using an external identity provider. And what I mean by that is if you are on a system that has exposed a connection with OAuth, SAML, or OpenID, then we'll authenticate using that mechanism. So those systems would include things like Microsoft Office 365. Those ecosystems would include Google. If you have a single sign-on provider like Okta, we would use that as well. So we're going to use those as our primary authentication mechanisms within that. Secondarily, not all organizations have those providers that are sitting behind or available to us as an organization. So we have a token-based authentication that will allow you to validate your email address via a one-time password and going through that email flow.
Great. Can we insert an inline image into an encrypted message?
Inline images are not currently supported with the Virtru encryption. It's something we're looking to change, but the reason that inline images are not currently supported is those images are uploaded to your cloud system unencrypted first, which would mean we need to access an unencrypted item within the cloud system. So that's not currently supported. However, our engineering team is working on a solution on that right now, so stay tuned on inline image support.
Great. Do we have to have enterprise Virtru in order to set up private keys?
Yes. That is definitely an enterprise offering that is required for you to set up private keys around that. We'd be happy to discuss what those requirements are, but that is part of that enterprise offer.
Excellent. Thanks, Brett. We are just getting to the end of the questions we've got in the queue right now. So just in case you have any others, we're just going to give you a moment to type those into the Q&A box. We do have a quick poll we'd like to run. So I'm going to do that right now while we're just waiting for any last questions. And please take a moment to fill this out. Thank you. While we're just waiting on these questions, actually, or on the poll, we do have some more questions. Will support for Microsoft Outlook for Mac be in Virtru's roadmap?
This is a similar question to the Mac Mail, and currently the add-in architecture is not appropriate for that, but is much more likely that it will be in the future as opposed to the pure Mac Mail environment, since Microsoft has added an architecture there. So no immediate plans in the short term. We are really focused on some of the next-gen user experiences, included the Office 365 web environment around that, but no immediate plans around Outlook for Mac, but we would definitely love to hear your requirements around that if you have those.
Okay, now I'm just going to close out the poll here. Thanks to everyone who voted, and I can, let's share the results back with everybody. Looks like a lot of people learned a lot more about how keys are managed, so that's great. All right, good stuff. Anyways, I think that is the end of our webinar. Let me just, Brett, could you pull up that last slide one more time, please? And just as we mentioned, we will be reaching out to you tomorrow to share the recording with you that we did today. In the meantime, if you're ready to learn more, we have pasted the Closer Look URL in the chat box here, where you can reach out to get in touch to set up a demo. And we'd just like to thank you so much for your time, attention, and all your fantastic questions today. We hope you have a great rest of the week, and thank you, Brett.
Thank you so much, everybody, for attending. Really appreciate it.